Well, it is a great honor for me to be here, and I've never been to Georgia Tech before, but I had the opportunity today to meet some of the professors in the materials and materials sciences and innovation area, and had a chance to walk across your beautiful campus. And I want to thank you for taking time out of what I know is an incredibly busy schedule as students to be here and talk about sustainability. What I hope to do is to, I guess, maybe change your minds a little bit about what sustainability might be and specifically what it might be for you. What I also hope to do is to have a dialogue with you. That's the part that I'm looking forward to after I share some information with you that hopefully sparks some questions and some maybe some curiosity in different parts of the business and what I do and what I work on every day. Then we'll be able to sort of exchange ideas. So it's my turn first to share some ideas with you. And what I didn't want to do is assume that just because you're here and just because you're sitting here that you know who Steelcase is. How many people have heard of Steelcase before? Yeah, that's good. Probably at some point in the week, maybe in daily, you are sitting in or working in Steelcase products. And so I'll share a little bit about the company first, and then we'll get into some things about circular economy. So I'm hearing nice music, but let me see. There we go. Okay. So Steelcase is about a $3 billion company. We have offices and manufacturing facilities around the world. So that's probably what you would have expected. What you might not expect is that we are a company who invests heavily in research, insight-led research. We have about 1,700 patents that range from design and engineering patents through business process patents and manufacturing and operations process patents. So that represents many, many years of work. We work through about 800 dealerships. We distribute our products through 800 dealerships worldwide. And in the last 5 years, we have served about 110,000 customers. Many of those customers are very large global organizations that you may be interning with or you may end up working for someday, as well as a lot of small startup and very innovative entrepreneurial companies. So that's a little bit about what we do. We are the largest in our industry, the largest contract furnishings company. And we make a lot of things. We have, along with that scale, the largest product portfolio. And that's how a lot of people know us. They know us by our products. So that's how you would interface with us at Georgia Tech. But really what business we're in is not necessarily the product business. We are in the people business. And our purpose as a company, our stated purpose is to unlock human promise. And what sustainability then means is that we're creating the conditions for that to happen, the social conditions, environmental and economic conditions, to allow people to do the best work they've ever done and to unlock their purpose as human beings. You might say that's a tall order for a $3 billion company. How in the world do you expect to do that? Well, those 110,000 customers, many of them global, with divisions larger than our company, are our customers. And because we are business to business, we're B2B company, we have the luxury of creating a lot of really close relationships with those companies. We talk to them about their business challenges, their plans for the future, their strategies, their challenges in terms of employee engagement and keeping generations like you interested in working for them and attracting the best talent. And so we put all of the work and research and studying of human behavior at work together with applications, understanding what kinds of settings create optimal environments for people to not only work, but also heal and learn. So that's within our scope, learning environments and healing environments. And we apply everything that we know and work with designers and those companies to create great environments that really allow people to do their best work. Now, sustainability, as Katrina was talking about, it's a really broad term. It encompasses a lot of different things. So in my role, just to give you a sense of that, I work on everything from strategy and how sustainability links with the core strategy of the company. I have responsibility for technical platforms, life cycle assessment and chemistry platforms that consult with product developers and help make decisions about the kinds of materials that go into our products, how we screen those materials to be clean and to support environmental and human health, and all the life cycle assessment and life cycle analytics that go into optimizing energy and optimizing the products that we're creating and putting out into the world. And I can get involved in food service and social issues and public policy, advocacy, and all kinds of other things, in addition to telling our stories about the work that we do. So that's broad, right? And if I were to ask each of you, what do you think about when you hear the word sustainability? What images come to mind? Maybe something, I'm going the wrong direction. So what images come to mind? This is my favorite image that's often affiliated with sustainability, the blowing grass, right? Now, what does blowing grass have to do with sustainability? I don't know. I don't know how blowing grass became the poster child for sustainable development, but it's used a lot. And I can tell you as a sustainability professional, it really has nothing to do with the kinds of things that I do every day and that my team is responsible for in terms of outcomes. But there it is. Or you might sort of conjure up this image, right? If you're involved in mechanical engineering and renewables, you're interested in renewables, you might be thinking about, all of the opportunity to advance the renewables industry in lots of different ways. And of course, we don't have blowing grass, but we at least have growing plants, which adds to the optimism of this picture. You might be thinking about other forms of renewables or automotive technology and how growing that pervasive infrastructure is going to really not only help advance our economy and grow our economy, but it's also going to mitigate maybe some of the issues that we associate with fossil-based fuels, like this. So this is for the more macabre in the room. This might be an image that you would kind of conjure up. All those impacts, carbon impacts and emission impacts of fossil fuels, and those what that creates in terms of human health impacts for us around the globe. You might think about this. The impacts of consumer consumption around the world and the kinds of waste and excess that implies. Or you might be thinking about materials and the toxicity that's associated with a lot of the personal care and just everyday products we use and what that exposes us to. These are really stark images, these latter images, and they're ones that can really kind of stir a feeling of frustration maybe or hopelessness at the kinds of problems that we have and that we're facing in the world today in society. But I would ask you this, are these problems really, right? They seem like problems, and a lot of my peers and a lot of people around the world spend a lot of time mitigating these problems. But I would challenge you to think about them really not as problems, but more symptoms of a much bigger problem. And that is a flawed design in our economy and the way we drive business models. And so all of the side effects of that incomplete and flawed systems design manifest themselves as problems, but in fact are really symptoms. And so what does that economy look like, right? So how many of you are familiar with the term linear economy? It's been used a lot, yeah? Well, let me, since that's not many of you, let's take a look at what that's about. So we begin with materials, right? So how do businesses work? Normally, if we think about businesses that make products, they start with raw materials, hopefully really wonderfully engineered and processed materials. We add great design and insight and research to the product concepts. We apply design thinking to them, and then we end up shipping them to our customers, and in our case, we might install them. Customers use them for a while, and then those products are ultimately removed from their home, and you notice there's nothing after that, right? That's it. That's the whole design right there in a nutshell. And what happens is, because it's not intentionally designed, you end up with what we just talked about, which is a whole collection of symptoms. So what do you think this incomplete design system delivers in the contract furnishings industry? And by contract furnishings, I mean it's not residential things that you would necessarily find in your home, but things that we would develop for, you know, global businesses, offices, hospitals, learning, higher ed learning environments. How much of that do you think goes to landfill? 70%. 70% of what we make every day and all the energy that we pour into making it ultimately ends up in our industry in the landfill. And we think we do a lot better than that, but the reality is we don't intentionally design. We offer services to customers, but often they might not remember, they might not talk to us about it, and we really don't have the mechanisms unless we are engaged with them or we are in conversations with them to know when they decide to part with our product. So that's bad, and that's again a symptom of the bigger problem. Other symptoms include flat to declining GDP. They include increased volatility in pricing of materials. Now this I find really striking because you can see here that for 100 years we've been on a fairly predictable trajectory of less and less volatility and more efficient processes and more accessible and cost-effective materials until here, 2000. And in the year 2000, we started to see something we had not seen before: increased volatility and increased pricing. Now, there's lots of reasons for that. It's a systems contribution to that, but I think we can all agree that's a striking change. That's disruption of a pretty significant proportion, and we don't see signs of that changing. And the impact of that on business is significant. We don't have, business likes predictability. Economies like predictability. This is not predictable. So you look at this, and I'm sure this is outdated because a periodic table sort of expands all the time. We've probably discovered something in the last 5 minutes that should be on this table. But I pulled it because, not because necessarily of its currency, but I think it tells a really important story. And this is, I don't know if you can read this. Can you read it? Yeah. So you see these dark elements here have about a 0 to 50 year lifespan left in terms of their availability and the known reserves on the planet accessible to us. If you look at the slightly lighter blue, that's 50 to 100 years. So we're talking about the dark blue being roughly 20% of the materials or elements on that table are going to be depleted within 50 years, and another 15% within 100. Now, you'll see here carbon, no problem there. We've got plenty of that, right? We all know the issues associated with that. And for us humans, you know, we have at least no worries of oxygen depletion. So, you know, that's one ray of hope in this diagram. But I think it's pretty, it's a pretty important data point. I want to talk to you about a little bit before I get into the alternative. What's the alternative to this? To talk to you a little bit about the changing role of sustainability leaders and sustainable business. Because I think it relates to what we're going to talk about in terms of an evolutionary change around how we do business and what we constitute to be a sustainable economy. So 25, 30 years ago and longer, we really thought about sustainability as environmental health and safety, focused very much on operations and operations efficiency. So we wanted to produce more with minimal resources, and we wanted to do that in a clean way. And a lot of the folks involved in EH&S at the time were cleaning up sites that prior manufacturing had produced. And so it was about cleanup, mitigation, reducing the impacts, doing less bad. And that's really important work, and a lot of that work continues today. But over the years, it was really, people recognized, you know, well, in order to have a huge impact on through operations, we need to be designing products differently. And oh, by the way, we think we can differentiate. So we started to see sustainability leaders in companies being responsible for the technical platforms that serve product development. We started to see the emergence of design for environment. That 20 years ago, we started to work with Bill McDonough and Michael Braungart, who are kind of considered the fathers of cradle-to-cradle design thinking. So we started to implement those ideas within our company, beginning with textiles and then moving on to core furniture elements. And we developed these competencies of designing for the environment and these technical practices of chemistry and life cycle work. But it became apparent that we could produce really great products, but we also needed to be a really great company. And most of the sustainability professionals then became engaged in enterprise strategy. How were we going to govern our processes to create social and environmental outcomes and still run a very profitable business? How were we going to goal set? How were we going to measure? How were we going to create IT infrastructure to ride on as we're collecting all of this data and reporting it out to customers and having this continuous improvement, developing new products? So the evolution of the sustainability professional has gone from kind of this, you know, person in operations who's providing the coaching to the consultant to the strategist. And now we're really crossing to the other side of the ledger. Sustainability professionals, because we are systems thinkers and we work with organizations and departments across the organization, we have a very different view into the company and the potential for innovation. So a lot of my peers are starting to move into strategy. Some of them are being asked to run strategy because they view the business as a system and they see opportunities in business model that maybe we hadn't been able to see before through the traditional lenses of the linear economy. And so I have to share with you that I'm not a trained sustainability professional. I am an unlikely candidate to do the work that I do. And I probably entered in the later stages of the product piece and sort of made only that part of the migration. And I can tell you, you don't get to lose all the things that came before. You continue to acquire these responsibilities. And I'm an unlikely candidate because I'm an engineer and I studied architecture. I didn't study EH&S, and I'm not an environmental science person. I'm not a chemist. I think engineers, and for the engineers in the room, you're systems thinkers. And there are two groups of people that when I go and talk to them about new ideas, they immediately get it. And those are IT people and designers and engineers. I would include those engineers as the big D, right? Big D designers. So I guess I just wanted to take you through that because I think there's a misconception about what sustainability people do, and even within the company sometimes that I work in, especially with interacting with new people, there'll be this sense, oh, I thought you just did some of that sustainability stuff, and that's usually limited to environmental issues, and those are a key part of our job, but it's not the only part. So that's why I spend a lot of my time working on business model stuff and innovation opportunities. And what I'm going to walk you through now, I've represented here kind of as an evolutionary diagram. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the limitations of the linear economy. And then I'm going to talk just about this new model, the alternate model to the linear economy, which is the circular economy and how we might enable it. And then I'm going to finish up talking to you a little bit about the evidence, the signs that this transition is well underway. So let's take a look at kind of some of the limitations of the linear economy. So you can see here, this is what I call the D model. So you can see that linear economy we talked about before, represented slightly differently, but it's wrapping. We've wrapped it, we've turned it on end, and we've wrapped it, and we can see that in a circular sense, we've designed about half a system, right? We're delivering it to the customer, we're installing it, and maybe we might get the chance to remove it at some point. But that's not a given in our existing model. So this is the best we can do. If we're really, really good in a linear economy, we can come in at that end point. We can try to sort of make that magic moment happen when a customer is in no longer needs or has use for the products that we've sold them. And we can try to intercept that. And as I discussed before, that's really heavy to do. But the circular economy is about seeing this a little bit differently. It's about taking that vertical line and stretching it out to live with the customer. Because in the existing linear model, we sell value propositions that are all about use, customers using our products. And yet we don't live there, and that's why this is superimposed on the moon. We call it the dark side of the moon, because it's a place where a lot of people research and visit, but as yet no one calls it home, really. So this is about getting really close with the customer and really embracing the life cycle of that product. We are a member of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation CE 100. It's 100 companies working together to advance the circular economy. And they do a lot of research, and if you haven't gone out to their site or you haven't heard about them before, go to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and read a little bit about the work and research papers that they've done. I'll share a little bit about that work today, but there's a lot of information there for whether you're a business student, you're an engineering student, a design student, wherever you're coming from. It's a good resource for you, and it'll kind of paint a different picture about the future than maybe you're thinking about today. But it defines, they define the circular economy as being restorative and regenerative by design. Design is a key element. It's not just design thinking, it's systems design thinking. It's thinking about the whole experience, and not just theoretically, but actually being part of that experience in the use phase of your products. And it's about keeping things at the highest utility and value at all times, forever. So this is what the dark side of the moon might look like. So this is our version of something that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation calls the butterfly diagram. And it's illustrated differently. This happens to be our version of it that we created before we found and before they created this butterfly diagram, but the concept is the same. So what we're looking to do in the circular economy is we're looking to create value that we don't create today, and we're looking to do that in the form of business models that also act like competencies to other business models. So that might be a little confusing. So let's take, for example, up here. Things closest to the dark side of the moon are closest to the customer. So when you think about, do you all want to buy a car? Do you want to own a car? Do you want to have the responsibility of a car? Well, maybe some of you do, but a lot of you and a lot of your generation does not want to have the responsibility of a car. You want to be able to use a car when you need it. And so you might think about subscription as access, right? How do you get access to the thing you need when you need it without having all of your capital tied up in the thing and having to address and manage the thing over time? So you might think about subscription, or you might, another model might be something that involves makers. How do you enable the maker community? How do you co-develop product with your customer and with makers and make it a very organic and fluid process of creation? So in those kinds of models, you can imagine you need to be able to repair and refurbish and flow the assets that you have in those models to make the most of them over time. And so in the case of subscription, repair and even remanufacturing might be, and reselling might be core competencies that you need to be able to operate a profitable model in subscription. So this, today, most of the companies that I know pursuing this are really looking at this as a growth opportunity. But you can see in the growth opportunity, it also mitigates a lot of the symptoms that we talked about before, because the concept of waste is essentially eliminated. And what you're looking to do is to recapture materials and products and keep them in use and high value. Does that make sense? Yeah? So what is the potential for growth? There have been a lot of studies that have been done, some by McKinsey, others have been conducted by various companies to try to sketch out what is the potential economic value to companies of this, and they're finding that the range is somewhere between 2x and 6x. So whatever size company you are, it's anywhere from the range of economic potential, revenue potential for the company is anywhere from 2x to 6x. So for a company like ours, where we don't have a lot of excess capacity, we might be looking at something toward the smaller end, possibly. And if you're a company with a lot of excess capacity, like the automotive industry, they can expect growth of around 6x their top line. That starts to get business people's attention. And in Europe, they've estimated that this will bring about $1.8 trillion to their economy just in Europe alone. So when I think about sustainability, I think about these business models. And Steelcase for about 10 years has been running these business models and experimenting with them. And here are some examples. We offer our eco services, which is that asset extraction and redeployment, but we also offer share models, event experiences, and even work share models. But these are really great learning tools. They have a hard time scaling unless you insert them into the main thrust of the business and into the core of the business itself. And so a lot of these have been really successful, but they've remained fairly slow growing until we start to connect them with the core business. And this one over here is our newest collaboration, and this really is more about technology and really starting to get a handle on the insights and data and patterns and analytics that we can draw from space and how people use it. And so this is a collaboration with Microsoft, and we just announced these two products and applications just a couple of weeks ago. You can go read more about them. But we also see a lot of evidence on the outside. So those are the things going on in our company, but there are lots of other companies experimenting with this. And these are just a few. We could fill pages and pages if we started to think about it. And once you put this lens on, you begin to see that there are all kinds of experiments. There are all kinds of transitions that companies are starting to make between the linear models that they've been running for a long time. Philips is selling light as a service. So instead of selling lamps and light fixtures, they're selling light as a service. And real estate developers love this because they are able to integrate this into their package, but they don't have to invest the capital in creating lighting systems in their environments. And so they're looking for also creative ways to use some of these services to benefit their own business. We see automotive examples. Uber and Airbnb were probably the first, and were heavily service-based, using other people's product in the form of space and creating a platform for selling that. So trying to leverage that excess capacity. So I guess what I would, we've talked a lot about, what it takes, systems design thinking, a real understanding of where our economy and business models could be headed. But I wanted to talk about just a couple of things that were not maybe so obvious in our conversation. And one is you as change agents coming into new companies, you're going to inherently change them. And maybe many of you are already working in companies and you wonder why they work the way they do. You have the opportunity to change them, but in order to do that, you have to have deep empathy skills. And I think especially in a technical education, I think I can look back and say I probably underestimated that. I underestimated the role of empathy in making change, because you have to really understand where people are coming from, what the implications of the changes that you're asking them to make, that they have well-worn ruts in their habits and in the road of habits that they've formed over many, many years. And if you can really foster and grow your mindfulness and empathy, you have a much better chance of making change happen and making it happen more profoundly and with more people on the bus and with greater results. And I guess I would talk a little bit about, I think after today I probably don't worry so much about you guys really embracing Internet of Things and augmented or artificial intelligence, data and the power of data. I think that's well woven into your curriculum. But I think starting to think about how those things are going to completely transform the discipline you're pursuing and everything. Because I had the opportunity to hear Vivian Ming speak to a small group a few weeks ago. And she's a neuroscientist and augmented intelligence researcher. And she said, the sad part is a lot of people are learning things that they won't ever practice because it won't be necessary, right? So what is that extra bandwidth and time? What are the things that will be eliminated that allow you to be more powerful? And one of those things is to foster a couple of mindsets. One is the mindset of an explorer. How do you become really good at understanding which problems to work on and how to distinguish problems from solutions, and how to think about asking the right questions to get to the right answers ultimately. And then behave like an entrepreneur. Because I think often coming into new roles, especially as students coming into the workforce or even the academic world, we often think maybe I have so much to learn, I also have something to contribute, but maybe I need permission. I would challenge you, you don't need permission. If you have great ideas, don't ask people for permission and don't ask them for help, ask them to invest. And that mindset tends to change everything in terms of how people react to your ideas and engage with you. So those would be just a few things I would say. So when I look at the word sustainability, and when I think about what it means, I think about it not as maybe the early images. I find it as a really hopeful thing to think about. I find it an innovation lens. I find that I'm just incredibly inspired by what's happening with data and analytics. I think it will make transparent things about the system that we've never been able to see before. They will enable, these insights will enable the circular economy to happen and transformation happen faster. But there's kind of a missing piece, and it's the piece we talked about a minute ago. It's you. You are the keeper of the flame. And I have a lot of hope in your generation because I think you have not only more information at your disposal than at any time, but maybe you finally have the technology to be able to mine that and understand it and do some sense making out of that and use that for good and for influence. I think you have the ability to understand how to rally a tribe. That's something that I think is maybe unique to the younger generations who've grown up with social media. I think you can rally the tribe and share and articulate how you feel about things and communicate those to other people. I think that once you recognize the power of being able to rally the tribe around massive change, you can start creating the world that you want to live in. And I think that for me is incredibly hopeful. I think that you have the power to make that happen. And so we're up here, those of us who've been doing this for a long time, we're paving the road and we're hacking through the brush. Hopefully the roads that you'll be able to ride on as you start your working life. So that's really all I had today, and was hoping we could have a conversation now, maybe.
Hi, thank you for speaking today. I know you said earlier that Steelcase's purpose is to unlock human potential, human promise.
Yep.
How do you feel that, I guess, fostering that sustainability in Steelcase's efforts, how do you feel that translates to people unlocking their human promise?
Yeah, I think it goes back to a lot of the, well, it's a number of things, but I would say maybe the two primary things are the research that we do. The primary research that we do is really about understanding human behavior. So, and being able to translate to that to space. So I'll give you an example of healthcare, right, and clinical settings. So we will go in, we have anthropologists and designers and researchers that will go into a space and they'll observe, they'll interview, they'll use all their techniques, we'll use video ethnography, and we'll really try to understand what's going on in that space. And what are people not just doing, but how are they doing it? And what are we used to call them crimes against the user. You know, like what are barriers to them doing their job, both in process and in physical space? We know and have evidence that we can improve patient outcomes by changing things in that space. Not only to encourage different habits, maybe, or processes in the clinical side of it, but to also maybe help people prevent mistakes and errors in transitioning from one caregiver to another, and being able to ensure that information, there's a hub, there's a space, there's a way that information gets translated, and that translates into much better outcomes for patients. So there's lots of examples we could share in learning and in working, but I think that the best way to be able to unlock human promise is to really understand what it is people are capable of, what is the potential that we have, as a company, creating a huge percentage of the spaces people work and live and heal in to do that. So that's a huge piece. But the other piece is really trying to operate a different kind of model in addition to the one we already operate, and to really take everything that we learn and all the competencies we have and aggregate them. So I think a lot of them that are required for the circular economy models, we already have. It's just how do we put them together in the right ways, and how do we augment them to make it work? I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Again, thank you for coming today. So as you mentioned, you didn't study anything within the environmental field, but instead architecture. So what initially inspired you and continues to maintain your passion for sustainability?
Well, I did study architecture and engineering, so I am I learned through some development activity maybe 15, 20 years ago that I'm a classic creative analytic, I guess you would call it today. So left brain, right brain. And I think what gives me a lot of inspiration for this work is the connection to being able to make change, the meaning, right? So I know when I get up every day, or if I have a really bad meeting or a conversation that didn't go as well as I thought, I know that there is immense potential to make change and immense potential to innovate. So the things that I've done before, a lot of my working life has been in front-end endeavors, sort of developing markets, or developing products, or developing new ideas and trying to sell those ideas. For me, I took this job, I raised my hand, and when I started, there really wasn't the group that exists now. There was a very different, sort of approach to it. And I think what inspires me is the ability to just use this as a white canvas for innovation. And I think that's probably what I would say is the biggest misconception about sustainability, is that, we're sort of Birkenstock wearing, non-business people. I think the best of us are very much business people and recognize the power of business to change things. We're not, corporate America, there are bad people in corporate America, probably. Thankfully, I don't feel like I work with them in our company, but I think that there are also bad companies. We have lots of examples, but I think the majority of corporate America is really interested in doing good things. They're composed of people like you. And I think you just have to figure out how to put that into motion. And I think one of the most powerful ways to make change is working with business and in business to make that change. So I think you can, it takes everything, right? It takes public policy, it takes, activism, it takes lots of things, but I think a business is a quiet but powerful machine to make that change. So. Over here, should we? Oh, no. I like hanging out here because I hung out over there, but I don't want to.
So my question revolves more around, I guess, sort of the corporate trend on more people working from home, using like shared office spaces. So in two parts, first being, have you seen like a huge effect from like a P&L perspective on your core business with that trend?
I think that's an excellent question. I think that's something that a lot of people might have been worried about, right? But we have not. And the reason why, I think, is because work is still a human activity, right? I mean, the reason you're all here in this room, you could be watching it from anywhere, right? Probably. But I think that work is a human activity, and building consensus is often a face-to-face kind of activity. And the value of running into people in the halls, right? And if I wasn't, I spend a lot of time traveling, but if I wasn't in the office on a regular basis, I would not be able to connect with people in the way that I can. And I think this idea of office working space being different now has changed a lot about our company and the way we think about space and design. So it's no longer the cubicle, right? There are a lot of businesses out there still working that way, but a lot of work now demands collaboration. and consensus making and sense making. And it is, as I learned talking to your professors and how you put your teams together, you know, work and development and innovation is a team sport. And I think it's also, we don't get that human contact if we don't have a space to do it. I think that it may be space, we're seeing more disaggregated. So companies don't have like one headquarters, you know, they've got smaller places distributed around the globe and that sort of thing. I think that has changed, and so that has created a need for us to be more distributed globally, to sell differently. It has had an effect on the scale of our portfolio, those kinds of things, but I would say we've been able to find ways to navigate that. But yeah, really key insight. Work is changing, and it is changing even faster now. So. Is there any question?
I think there's one question. Hi, thank you again for speaking today. Going back to, I know you talked a bit about material selection, and so how much would you say that the environmental impact of the material you choose affects like your guys' decision when choosing materials versus a company or a manufacturing company who maybe isn't focused as much on sustainability?
Well, it all begins with materials, I think. You know, the material choices that we make are a huge piece of the impact. Certainly energy. We deal a lot in metals, you know, steel and aluminum, high energy materials, as well as well, on any given share, there might be maybe 200 to 250 different discrete materials, and we would consider like a ball bearing grease a material, right? So there's a lot of materials diversity that goes into the products. Our products are very complex. And one of the insights that we had is that really the same kinds of materials are present in very small scale technology as they are in some benchmarking work that we did. So in very small scale chips, same materials, we just work at big scale and they work at little scale. So I think it has a huge effect. We prioritize human and environmental health first, so we are choosing materials that are clean and that are going to have positive impacts. We will not use recycled material if we cannot guarantee a source and know what's in it. We really, I think, have invested a lot in that, and that we're really competent in understanding materials. I think what's really disappointing often in our development work is that the materials that we want don't exist. So we are working right now to develop a concept for textiles in hospital environments, because vinyl, right, is used because it's highly cleanable and really durable, but it doesn't have such great properties in terms of environmental properties. And so what we're looking for is how can we use real textiles where people can feel that sense of, you know, warmth and touch, and yet it performs in those kinds of harsh environments. So I think that we invest heavily. I don't know that there are companies that invest, a lot of companies that invest as heavily in understanding the material composition at the molecular level and what the human environmental impacts are. But we've been at this for a long time now, and I would say we still make mistakes. We still have challenges, but yeah, it's a huge platform for us, a huge technical platform. I hope that answered your question. Okay. Well, is that it? Any more? Well, oh yeah, we have one.
I'll just ask okay. Yeah. So I just have a quick question. When it comes to like the circular economy, for example, you know, I think a lot of bottles, like we used to have glass bottles, and then we made a purposeful decision in a lot of places to go to disposable. And there are still some impressions and maybe even some laws that are require you to label something as remanufactured or reused. And so how do you see like Steelcase going up against these maybe expectations that people have to want something that's new and have ownership of things instead of going to a service-based or
yeah.
The dark side
Service-based model. They, we will probably always have people that want to own things, right? And they want things that are precious and enduring. And Bruce Smith is a designer, and I think he'll be speaking about this in February at the Green Biz Forum in Arizona. But he's also a professor, and he talks about this, sort of evolution when we had this idea of craft and people made things and they kept them in their family. You probably have family heirlooms, all of you, that that whether they're tiny or big, these are precious things to your family. What causes someone to want to have that and keep it and hold on to it? So I think maybe there will be, because there maybe is such a push for streamlining and simplifying people's lives and not owning all the things, right? But accessing the things and using them when they're needed. I think it may inspire a craft movement that complements this, I don't need to, I don't want to own everything. So this product service model may be complemented with maybe a resurgence of craft and making beautiful things. We've seen it, we call it maybe the wabi-sabi sort of effect, where people are wanting to know the history, the provenance of things. They're wanting things that aren't mass manufactured. They are creating specials and designs and wanting us to make them. They're making their own things. Those would have an effect on our business, right? When people start making their own stuff. And so, we have to find ways of collaborating that are very different than maybe we have before. Yeah, so thanks for that question. It's a good one. You guys ask great questions. Well, if there aren't any more, I just want to say thank you to you all. And thank you to Georgia Tech for inviting me to come and talk with you today. It's been a really hopeful day for me and a really inspiring day. And thanks for spending an hour or so of your time here.